Maritime Museum, but we will in fact fudge those dates a little bit. But I thought, look, this extract from the Mercury was a good way to start, and it was done in the embryonic stages of the museum's establishment. A proposal to establish a purpose-built museum on the Civic Square site, as it was called, between the Marine Board building and Carnegie. And as you can see, it would have involved demolition of the historic buildings that have survived there along the Davey Street frontage, and the tunnels relate to another proposal, which was to locate the museum in the tunnels under Princes Park, and the old Mulgrave Battery. That didn't get very far, as you can appreciate. Nor did this, of course, though a similar idea was to come forward in the late 1990s. We'll talk about that shortly. Okay. 50 years, but we were in fact starting the story a bit earlier than that. We can probably go back to 1931, when the Shiplovers Society of Tasmania was formed, and they began the process of collecting various nautical artefacts of Tasmanian historic interest. So much so that by February 1936, they were able to mount a maritime or nautical exhibition in the town hall during the regatta week. And here's the publicity for it. $1 shilling was probably quite a bit of money in 1936. And this, I assume, is the official opening of the exhibition by the Governor, Sir Ernest Clark. And I think that might be Captain Harry O'May over on the left, extreme left. But the interesting thing about the picture is that some of those images in the background are quite familiar. And I'm sure if we look closely, some of them are in our collection today. Probably most of them, actually. The other interesting thing about the photo is the rather cluttered nature of the display, and that's something that carried through for a number of years with the Maritime Museum as well. And so we get to the opening at St George's on the 7th of December, Pearl Harbor Day, 7th of December 1974. But there had been quite a bit of work going on prior to that. The Shiplovers had lobbied for quite some years to have a maritime exhibition in TMAC, and they were partially successful with that. In the 30s and 40s, the then curator, or then director of the museum, was quite sympathetic to that. But in 1966, when the new building opened across the road here, down that one, you get it right, it incorporated a shipping room up on the first floor looking out over Constitution Dock. And that was a credit to the work of everybody in Shiplover Society at that time. But a group of enthusiasts decided that wasn't really enough, and in 1972 they started working on proposals for a permanent maritime museum. And so the opening, St George's in the annex to the church, appropriately the Mariners' Church, on 7th of December 74. And here we've got Bert Johnson, sort of looking towards the camera, one of the foundation members of the museum, talking to another foundation member, Philip Fowler, and in between is yours truly, with hair. So it is a definite record that I was there for the opening. But that was my only involvement with the museum at that time, and it was another 10 years or so before I became more actively involved with it. And this gives you an idea of what the display was like. As I say, fairly cluttered, but typical of any museum established initially by a group of enthusiasts, in which they use what they've got basically and try to show as much as they can. This is Bert Johnson again, and donned a suitable uniform for the occasion. And again, if we look very closely, a lot of the material there would be very familiar to us today. In fact, going back to the previous slide, this model up on the top right is the Royal Viking Sky, which has been featured on and off in our displays ever since. Another one of those foundation members was Dave O'May, who made beautiful models of many of the O'May ferries, some of which are on display in our museum today. Quite a few of the others in store. I don't know the other gentleman from. Over in the museum, we have a foundation members board listing all those people who donated or contributed in some way to the establishment of the museum back in '74. And amongst them is the Hobart Tug Company, locally owned firm at that time, which was later taken over by North Western Shipping and Towage. But just by way of a slight diversion to look at the shipping activity in the port at the time the museum was established, I thought I'd pull out this slide of Hobart Tug Company's oldest vessel, which was still operating in 1974. She was then 54 years old. She'd been built in 1920. Swiftness, ex-Plough, and had been acquired by the Hobart Tug Company in 1956. They had in turn been established post-war, World War II, mainly to operate the tug and barge operation between Hobart and Boyer for Australian newsprint mills. But by the mid-50s, the need for harbour tugs, if you like, had become apparent, and they decided to buy Swiftness mainly for that sort of work, to help in the berthing and departure of vessels within the port. And in 1973 they acquired the Anson, well rather the Electrolytic Zinc Company acquired the Anson, but it was operated by Hobart Tug Company, hence it had the same funnel colours as the Swiftness in the previous slide. And Anson was used then for many years to carry waste from, referred to as Jarosol, from the zinc works in Brisbane to dump off the continental shelf. She was eventually sold in the late 1990s, from memory. What else was going on around the port in 1974? We still had a coastal cargo operation with ships maintaining traditional links out of Hobart to Melbourne, Sydney, and also to Adelaide. And this was Mary Hollyman, the last of the Hollyman fleet, a Tasmanian company which had been around then for many, many years. She was operating a fortnightly service between Hobart, Burnie and Adelaide. And berthed there, this was her original berth around at the old Macquarie Wharf number 4, before that was demolished. In fact, it's in the process of demolition there to make way for the marginal wharves, numbers 4, 5 and 6 that are there today. We still had a fruit export trade in 1974, and ships were using the berths in Solomon's Cove. This is a photo of 2 fruit ships at King's Pier, which was shortly to be demolished, both laden for Southeast Asia. The Hong Kong Success on the north side and Golden Sun on the south. Another fruit ship over in the background at Macquarie Wharf, loading for Europe, and a Union Steamship Company vessel arriving from across the Tasman with a load of paper pulp for Australian district mills. Another regular trade at the time, which was to disappear over the next 10 to 15 years.
In the Swiftman Sea too, with barges.
Yes, indeed, that's right. Yes, over there in Macquarie number 1. The previous year, 1973, Britain had joined the common market, and so our fruit export trade began to go into decline as traditional markets were closed off to us. But as you can see, the Southeast Asian market was still booming at that time.
The cars are interesting too for that.
Indeed. The cars are always interesting in these photos. And we still had traditional cargo vessels coming in. It was right at the end of that era of conventional cargo handling as containerisation was gathering speed. And this was also the last British flag conventional cargo vessel to come into Hobart. So she was quite notable in that way. She brought a load of cocoa beans from Africa for Cadbury's and was here for quite some time, as I recall. That's the Egton, owned by Headlands of Whitby, I think. And this is the type of vessel that was taking over from those conventional cargo ships. And this ship is actually quite notable in that she was the first container ship in the world designed and built as such. Built for Macquarie McCacken of Melbourne as the Kooringa, and later taken over by Associated Steamships, and then sold in the 70s to Hong Kong Islands Line and renamed Island Container. And as such, she was a regular into Hobart through much of the 70s, going to Brisbane and loading containers of zinc. And we also had the lash ships, lighter aboard ships, American vessels that were running a regular service from the Pacific coast of the United States to Australia, and they handled barges and a limited number of containers. But the idea was that the barges would be offloaded in the various ports of call and then loaded again on the next ship in the service. They were big vessels, and China Bear, seen here, and her sister Philippine Bear, each once went to Selk's Port to bunker, take on fuel, and thus became the longest ships ever to go through the Tasman Bridge. And as far as I know, that's a record that still stands. today. Back to our main story. In 1979, having established themselves at St George's, the members of the Maritime Museum decided that they might acquire a vessel, and they were given the steam whale chaser Shane's 2, which had recently become unemployed over in Western Australia at Albion. They sent a crew across to bring her to Hobart, and then quickly discovered that restoring a steam-powered vessel to meet all sorts of survey requirements and so on was a fairly onerous and a task into which he poured a lot of money. And so in 1982, someone offered to buy the vessel, and of course the museum quickly accepted the offer. And she in fact then did an aborted trip to Heard Island, I think, before going back to Albany, where she still remains today, in a fairly parlous condition, I gather. Okay. And so to Secheron. For various reasons, and probably the main one being the lack of space at St George's, the museum eventually decided to move, and on the 28th of May 1983 it opened at new premises of Secheron House in Battery Point, a historic house built for the surveyor George Franklin in 1831, and quite an appropriate setting for the museum. But also appropriate in that it was close to where shipyards, many of the shipyards at Battery Point were or had been, including this one, which was Ross's slip down in Secheron Bay. It's a pretty fuzzy photo, but again, it's probably pretty early also, 1860s, I guess. It's the vessel is the City of Hobart, the second ship of the Tasmanian Steam Navigation Company, and built in the early 1850s. The only two-funnel ship that they ever owned. But there was another interesting maritime connection with Secheron. In 1942, we had a visit from the American-owned, though Panamanian-flagged sailing ship Kyalani. And there's a long story about Kyalani, which I can't really go into, but suffice to say that some of the crew of the ship was detained in Hobart for quite some time because it was basically not seaworthy, and some of the crew ended up being arrested for mutiny, charged by the captain with mutiny, and they spent some of their time under house arrest at Secheron, during which they helped to dig out the cellars down below, which many years later we were able to use as exhibition spaces. And this is some of the crew. Thanks, Colin. I think you were responsible for this photograph in Australian Sea Heritage quite some years ago. Secheron was a great spot, but the main problem with it was it was hard to find. So signs like this were placed in suitable locations, and hopefully, and visitors could eventually find their way there on the narrow cul-de-sac of Secheron Road. And when they walked in the door, they were met by cheerful volunteers like Marge Craig, but I included that because it gives you an idea of such things as the size of our shop, of the time. This is it. And what's up the town? Pretty much it.
And public phone.
The public phone knows it well too, doesn't it? About that time, we got our first logo, which I believe was designed by Louis Rodway, and identified us with the Harriet McGregor, and told us that Secheron House was on Battery Point. And these were some of those thoughts of the day at a social function at the museum, which we seem to have a lot. In those days, I joined their ranks in 1985 in one of those very Hobart situations where I ran into somebody at the Hobart tip, and he said, there's a vacancy on the Maritime Museum Committee, would you be interested? And I was duly elected at the next AGM. But these were some of the founding and slightly later members. Henry Baldwin over on the extreme left, Max Chesterman, who was a president for quite some years, Joy, Michael and her husband Liz over here on the right, and in between was another Foundation member, Philip Fowler. And my job was mostly in the social functions to act as a waiter. This photo was taken on an evening when we were presented with the model of the Empress of Australia, which is still a prominent part of our exhibition. And one of her former masters did the handover for us, and also gave us an A&L house flag. There'd been a hasty bit of work beforehand because the model arrived with the old A&L funnel colours, red, white, and blue. And slightly earlier than this, they had decided to change to the more patriotic, if you like, of the time, green, yellow and white. And a condition of us displaying the model was that we had the funnel repainted. So one of our members quickly got to work and did the job. Fortunately, he was quite a skilled model maker, so it looked pretty good. And in the Secheron displays were some very familiar items. The Rex bell, which is now up in the Carnegie Gallery. And we began to receive donations as well, as our public profile was raised. And this lockboard, which is still on display, was donated by 3 ship's captains. From memory, one was British, one was German, and one was Polish. And they'd all been at sea in World War II, and they joked, of course, on opposing sides. They were all very adept at the art of knot making and provided us with this fantastic display. And so to Secheron, to Carnegie. A little bit happened in between times though. There was a feeling that though things were going well at Secheron, the museum needed to look to the future. And a report was commissioned from a consultant named Fry, who basically gave us a direction which we're following today. But that was not without some dissension within the ranks, if you like, and there were two schools of thought as to which direction we should head in. One was to follow Fry and develop relationships with the Hobart City Council, with TMAG, and whoever else was interested. And the other was to remain fiercely independent and hope that we survived. And that led to some quite interesting committee meetings over those years of the late 1990s, certainly. And then the whole process was accentuated in 1995 when we were told that the state government wanted to sell Secheron House. And so we had to start looking around for new premises. And believe it or not, the first place that we looked at was the Carnegie Building. It was suggested to us by the Lands Department as a possibility. They said, oh, the council wants to get rid of it, and so on. We went to see the Lord Mayor and ran into a brick wall, basically. They weren't interested. So we went round in circles for a few years. They even considered the naval depot over at H&O Stewart until we thought about all those weather walls needing painting. Anyway, over 5 years, the wheel turned full cycle and we ended up at Carnegie. In the meantime, a second proposal for a purpose-built museum had been put forward by several people, including committee members Peter Roche and our later manager, Jeff Gordon, and that was for a purpose-built museum, again on the old City Square site, but this time, if I recall, certainly retaining the historic buildings as part of the structure. Anyway, with establishment at Carnegie on the 20th of March 2000, we had a royal opening. And this photo, I think, was taken as the Queen was about to leave the premises. Over here with the blue dress is the then Secretary Janet Steele, and just to her left is the manager, Jeff Gordon. Both of whom were quite relieved that the whole thing is over. The Queen looks as if she's not quite sure what she's supposed to do next. I guess that's probably par for the course. But another thing I'll just point out to you is up the back there, behind one of the security box, I think, is the Foundation Members Board listing the Hobart Take Company amongst others. And around the bottom of that is a Latin quotation, ex libris acta probat, which means the outcome justifies the deed. As far as I know, that's never been adopted as the official slogan of the Maritime Museum, though I could say that over the years some members have taken it quite literally. The move to Carnegie was huge in all sorts of ways, because for the first time we had a professionally arranged display, and the difference between this and St George's and even Secheron is quite remarkable. We also had council and state government support, including considerable financial support at the time. We had a full-time manager and a full-time curator, well not full-time, but certainly a professional curator for the first time. The first issue of our journal, Maritime Times, came out not long after the move to Carnegie, and we became much more involved in community activities. So there's a couple of photos taken in those early days. The displays, of course, being in sort of corridor style, if you like, around making the maximum use of the space, because at that time we only had the ground floor of the building, not the gallery upstairs. And in 2010, we acquired what I guess remains our largest exhibit, the Yacht Westwood. Sort of a repeat of the Shane's Two story, at least at the beginning, in that it was donated to us, and a group of members went to Queensland to collect the vessel and bring it back to Hobart. The story, the similarities between Westwood and Shane's Two diverge from that point, because unlike Shane's Two, Westwood has been a great success and a great asset to the museum and continues to be so. Another thing that developed after the move to Carnegie was, as part of our community outreach, if you like, was the involvement with school groups, and particularly school holiday programs, and cooperation with the May Queen Trust was another aspect of this, so that we were able to use her on occasions, as here, during a school holiday program, to show children what life was like on an 1860s sail trading ketch. We even got them to swap the decks, if you can see it. And school groups have become an important part of our activity over the years. Here, a group quite interested in the wheelhouse of the Silver Crown. I suspect mostly because they each wanted to have a turn of the wheel. And the members' side of things is something else which has developed quite dramatically over time. So with annual lunches and dinners and so on. This is actually the 40th anniversary lunch, so 10 years ago, including our guest speaker, an RAN officer. And we've been able to celebrate birthdays. So here, a 90th birthday for John Mitchell and Jeff Andrew Arthur, who helped to blow out the candles. And we've even had a choir. Some familiar faces there, singing for Dougal McDougall as part of his 90th birthday celebrations. And we've also been on, there have been walks and so on, visits to interesting places, historic interest. So here we're in the Bank Arcade in the middle of town. It's quite a fascinating tour. And celebrating the end of an Australian wooden boat festival. I think this is 2017. Another activity that the museum has become much involved with in the last 20 years. And May Queen, of course, very much a part of that as well. And we shouldn't forget people like Rona Hollingsworth, who was our first professional curator and was with us for about 20 years. And so helped to lay the foundations for much of what we've got today. Amongst our, we've been able to not only set up permanent exhibitions in Carnegie, but also to have a series, a rolling program of temporary exhibitions. One of the earlier ones, and a very successful exhibition, was on surfing, which brought in a whole new community of people who would otherwise not have visited the museum. And we had similar ones involved with fishing and yachting and so on, which also opened us up to a broader community. And then in 2020, we closed down. We were very optimistic when we closed in March. We said we might be open again in July. But in fact, it was nearly a year later that the museum opened its doors once again. A bit of learning by work there. But the opportunity was taken during that close down period to undertake a much discussed rejig of the museum displays. And this is the Argyle Street Gallery, which we saw earlier with all the corridor panels and so on, being opened up and rejuvenated to its present form. And then part of the redevelopment of the displays involves some interesting issues, such as how do you get a cannon up to the Carnegie Gallery? And when you take it in the lift, but you need a lift technician standing by just in case. That's this guy here on the right. And now we have in the Argyle Street Gallery and the Temporary Exhibition Gallery adjoining it a great feeling of space. It's open and airy, and I think creates a real impression when you walk through the doors. And this is the Temporary Exhibition space. A couple of familiar faces there, setting up one of the exhibitions.
That's your exhibition, you know.
My exhibition. But again, it shows how the space has been opened up, and it's just a light, airy exhibition space. Very, very appropriate. And then you have tour groups wandering through as well. On this occasion, for some reason, we also had people playing music, which sort of added to the occasion. And following on from the redevelopment downstairs, the development of the Carnegie Gallery itself, with the lift in place and so on, was the logical next step. And we were able to bring out of storage a lot of items that hadn't been able to be shown for quite some time, including this marvellous model of the cargo liner Port Sydney, which is one of my favourites. Amongst other visitors, we have adult groups coming into the museum as well from time to time, and this was a group from the Institute of Marine Architects. Remember it? Being a bit silly, posing around the figurehead of Mary Wadsworth. Mary Wadsworth, is that right?
No, it's
Mary Wadley. Quite some years ago, an endowment fund was established to encourage financial donations to the museum from the membership and from the broader public. And that's been very useful to us in acquiring various items, including a painting of the convict transport Lady East, which was offered to us from the UK, but in fact it cost a considerable amount of money, not only to buy, but particularly to transport out to Hobart. And this is the unveiling of the painting by the then Governor, the Honourable Kate Warner. I'm sorry, I should say Professor Kate Warner. There's another community activity within the museum as well. From time to time we have book launches. This is Gary Richardson in 2014 launching the book Sail and Steam about vessels trading into and around St Helens and the east coast of Tasmania generally. And groups like the World Ship Society meet occasionally in the museum of an evening to share their interests and look at DVDs and so on. And another aspect of the Carnegie Building that we put to good use at least once a year during the open house weekend is the caretaker's flat up on the upper level of the Davey Street frontage. And this is a view out one of the windows there looking across towards the docks. A very interesting place. Now, back to how's the shipping scene changed from 1974. Well, I mentioned all those interstate cargo vessels, Australian flag, Australian crew, and so on. This is the face of coastal shipping today. These two ships are regular visitors into Hobart on the concentrates run, coming from either Burnie with concentrate from Rosebery or from Port Pirie mainly. And the other day they were both here at the same time, which was most unusual. So we've got the ICS Silver Lining over on the left and the ICS Silver Spirit on the right. They don't fly the Australian flag, although they've long been on the coastal trade. Silver Lining is registered in Antigua, I think, St John's, Antigua, and Silver Spirit is at Nassau in the Bahamas. So that's the face of coastal shipping today, a huge change that's taken place over those 50 years. Ships have got more colourful too. Gone on, well, largely gone on the days of just the black hull and maybe a two-tone funnel. And so we get ships like SES Grey coming in and certainly announcing their arrival with their colour schemes. And again, illustrating the changes in coastal shipping, because these tankers now do the coastal run, distributing petroleum products, etc., from the refineries to or around the Australian ports. And they do a shopping run to Tasmania, Hobart, Devonport, Burnie, and occasionally Bilbao as well, and unloading all our necessary fuel requirements. But SES Grey is actually Chinese owned, as you probably guessed from the lettering on the side. And we get ships loading logs, or occasionally unloading cowside and other cargoes at Macquarie Wharf, and of course at this time of year, cruise ships virtually every time we look out the window. My favourite Disney wonder there in that one, with its Mickey Mouse ears. To finish off, the future. There's always something around the corner, and there are many exciting developments going on at the moment. And just to mention two, we've been granted a lease by the council of the Semaphore Cottage over at Princess Park to set up a display there, which will include this lovely model that dates back to the early days of the Maritime Museum's collection. That will help to illustrate the system of semaphore signalling and so on, of which the cottage at Princess Park was a part. also, a little while back, the Commonwealth Bank donated us this frieze, which many of you would have seen, that was installed in the bank when it was opened in 1954. And I believe it was designed with the help of the Shipbuilders Society. So very appropriate that it's now been donated to us. It's in storage, and the problem, of course, at the moment is how to actually display it. It's mighty heavy amongst other things. And I think that brings us to the end of the pictures. So just to finish off, 50 wonderful years, or maybe if you want to stretch it back a bit further, all wonderful years, but all a tribute to people in those early days who had the foresight to actually keep some of these bits and pieces rather than throw them away and be destroyed. And much of that has formed the basis of the displays that we were able to put on today. And that process of donating material seems to be ever increasing. Chris and Camille and others, sometimes at their wits' end, and Colin, trying to deal with the influx of material that's coming in. But that is fantastic. People now think of us automatically as the place for these sorts of items. Also the place to come to if they're writing a book or they're researching in other ways and so on. We are now a recognised source of information. And a place to come and visit. Though only 10% of our visitors are locals, Tasmanians, so we have to work on that. But another 50 years. Let's look forward to it. Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Rex. I was actually not introducing Rex, I don't follow the conversation producers, but everyone knows Rex anyhow. But thank you very much for that really good